Special summons to the trustees, if they would join us up front. Thank you. We'll get going. I might be over here. We won't worry about me. So in response to concerns from a lot of community members, we've tried to set up a town hall. We've tried to figure out a format that will work for everybody. Slightly different than what we've done in the past because we've had a lot of conversations on these issues, and we hope this will allow for the level of interaction and discussion that some people in the community have been looking for. All right. And we have new technology that we have not used in the town hall before. All right. Oh, hey, Rich. Here. I'm going to give Rich a minute to get seated.
Thank you.
All right. For tonight's format, we have from 6:30 to 7:15 for this section for the town hall. I'll give a pretty brief opening presentation. We'll have questions and comments from the community to make sure that we hear from everyone. We will initially limit how long people speak initially, but once everyone has spoken, you're more than welcome to come back and ask more questions or make more comments. When we'll have a microphone for you, if you wish to, we'll pass around. If you have something to say, if you would give us your name and town of residence. Trustees, administrators, or staff may have answers to your questions. Keep in mind that in this forum, these are individual responses. The board's official voice, so to speak, happens in the public meeting later when the board votes as a whole. Tonight we are going to, when this concludes at 7:15, and we're going to conclude it then because we need to move the equipment into the library so that we can record the regular Board of Ed session at 7:45. So in between then at 7:15, for anyone that's interested, we are going to give a tour of where the annual budget vote and election of trustees has taken place and discuss the security options there so you can see it firsthand. And besides that, I want to say welcome. I really appreciate you guys all coming out and making it this early time. I'll do some quick introductions. I'm Sarah Jones. I am the president of the Board of Education. I'm going to go in order. We have Peter Giorizzo, Dr. Peter Giorizzo, who's your superintendent. Rich Galati, trustee. We have Tim Madden, trustee. Marianne Russo, trustee. Dave Ledmar, trustee and your vice president. Joanna Commander, a trustee, and Lisa Vizza. And we have some administrators with us tonight. We have our assistant superintendents for business, Olivia Watsi, and for curriculum instruction, Rob Chiblecki. We also have our newly hired, thank you, coordinator of safety and security, Bob Oldham. I was like, I'm going to space on Bob Oldham. Bob, thank you so much for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. And we also have Betty Campy, by the way, who is the district clerk and runs our elections. All right. So here's your brief overview. The intent of which I'm going to get into as few details as I can. Some of you have followed this issue very closely and some of you have not. So I would like to establish some parameters so that everyone has the same set of facts for us to have this discussion about. All right. We have two sets of elections that take place in our schools. The County Board of Elections under New York State election law runs some of our elections, the primary and the general elections. The primary elections are now one election. This year it'll be June 25, and the general election will be on November 5. They have held elections at the Seacliff School, the Glenwood Landing School, and at the middle school. We also have a separate set of elections, the North Shore Schools, under New York State education law, which oversees the annual budget and election of trustees to the Board of Education. This year, that's on May 21. and any other special votes that the school district holds, including, for example, a bond referendum. Generally, we have held these, not generally, we have held these consistently at the high school. Oh, I'm so sorry. I was like, is it something simple? But no. Okay. There are some parameters and constraints around these elections, as you might imagine, given the references to laws. With the county, with the general elections, the law says they're going to designate the polling places, and the law further designates that once they do, where exactly in the building that will be held. These are reasonable arguments that they need to be near the entrance. They want the elections to be accessible. When it's the county and the elections take place, sometimes there are other municipalities that control street openings and the parkings. And importantly, there's some pending legislation regarding this. There are a number of school districts that have recognized the need for legislation to give them enough voice to be able to say, have some input on where in their school district elections can be held. And we think this bill would be significant because at minimum it would allow us to say, have more of a say in which locations, even in the district, that we feel we can make more or less secure. For the school district elections that are run by education law, this is a law, for those of you who have been here at previous meetings, we've had a lot of discussion about this. And the last piece that's been under discussion is that the law indicates that if you have a schoolhouse that's adequate and accessible, that is where the election should be held. There's further reference to precedent about if that's where it's been held, that's where it should be held. And if you do not have such, you can move the election. So this is a point, obviously, that we've consulted with our attorneys about in the past. So further with the school district elections, in terms of our parameters, we need to accommodate between 2,000 and 3,000 voters. We've got to have equipment and space for about 8 stations where the voters are going to check in. We use 12 to 15 privacy booths where you're going to bubble in your ballot. We use 4 voting machines, including an AutoMark machine, which is intended so that disabled voters can vote. We have parking requirements, and we have ADA accessibility, which covers that the space is accessible, that the parking is, the bathrooms, the voting machines, etc. And importantly, school district elections run off some specific software that we have to have a secure computer network to be able to accommodate, both to run the elections and to ensure that everyone who has the right to vote is actually able to vote. Thus far, our efforts to ensure safety. On the county side, we don't currently have schools in the building. Sorry, we don't have students in the building for the general elections. We decided to hold the superintendent conference day so we can control that. We used to have 2 primaries that we had to deal with, the local and the federal. Fortunately, those have been consolidated and moved to the end of June. It's absolutely still something we need to deal with, and traditionally, thus far, we've been able to separate the space where the voters are coming into the schools. We have absolutely had to add security. There is no question of cost to our efforts, but we've been able to keep the voters and the students separate during the day. It'll be a little easier with the single primary so close to the end of the school year. With the district elections, we've had numerous security reviews, including most recently, we were fortunate to have the Nassau County Police Department's Homeland Security Division come in and review the space behind you specifically. The voters do use a separate entrance from the students and regular visitors to the school. The area for the vote can be completely closed and separated for the school day. It is in the building that's most frequently used by the community currently. And we're trying in a lot of ways to show that versus some other buildings and some other situations, the high school can be set up in a way that is both accessible and secure, even if we have concerns about some other locations. The big picture is this, is the goals. We want an election that's secure for everybody, and we want an election that's accessible to everybody when we're talking about, in particular, the vote that we control that's this coming May. Our community has absolutely expressed strong feelings on both of these points, which is why we're here tonight. I don't want to over-summarize or speak for any of you. You're all going to have that opportunity. But certainly we have some parents who are very concerned that people are allowed into our buildings at all without the usual security protocols, while we have other people that point out that this building and the high school in particular is regularly used by the community. And we're asking people to cast votes about the schools, and excluding them seems unreasonable. People that are concerned, too, about making sure everyone votes. All right. So we're going to go to audience questions and comments. We have some additional satellite views and schematics, et cetera. If anyone has like specific questions about how we're going to do things, we can bring up some additional material for you, but I don't want to take up your time in going through more than we have to. If you would limit your comments and questions to about 2 to 3 minutes to start with, make sure everybody gets an opportunity, and then you're more than welcome to come back to the podium. We are going to have the tour of the gym afterwards. And part of the reason for the timing of this is that the school board at the public meeting tonight needs to have a vote about the legal notice for where the elections will be held. We've had a number of conversations about this. The public is always welcome at public comment, and a number of people have taken advantage of that, but we wanted to make sure that we heard from everyone before that. I've got the microphone. If you'd like to speak, we'll pass this around, and if you would just give us your name and town of residence, please. I'm going to step away from this one before I fire it up. Okay, and I'm going to try and bring up.
So just as a, if you want to be captured on the video, you've got to come up here and speak, because this will not, you're welcome to use the podium. Okay?
I'm Grant Kletter from Seacliff. Thank you for providing this opportunity to the community to openly discuss the election concerns with you. We've been requesting the removal of elections from our schools for about 1.5 years. At this moment, time is of the essence, as Ms. Jones pointed out, that the board will be voting tonight on the location for this year's election. We hope that you will hear the concerns of the community and make this change, which appropriately prioritizes the safety of our students and staff above anything else. With that, I'd like to ask an initial question. I think it would be helpful to understand the district's belief that the high school is a safer location than the elementary and middle schools. The board has previously stated that they feel comfortable with the high school for district election, but don't believe the other schools are appropriate for elections. The superintendent sent an email to the district on February 28th, sharing this sentiment and stating that the high school was safer than the elementary and middle schools due to the following factors, and only these factors. 1, it has its own entrance for the election, separate from that used by students and staff. 2, doors can separate the gym area from the rest of the school. And 3, there are separate bathrooms in the voting area. This is actually not a unique feature of the high school. In fact, the safety infrastructure is virtually equivalent at all schools, and we consider all to be equally unsafe for elections. I'd like to ask whether you still feel the high school is safer, and why. Absolutely, yeah. There's differing opinions. We'd love to hear.
It's fine. I'm going to bring this up. I don't and then I'll leave it to you guys too. This is a partial schematic of the high school. It shows where the students and regular visitors enter versus the voter entrance and the perimeter. Yep, I messed that up. The perimeter that we can close off.
Well, I actually have a couple questions for council. Well, I'm just curious and, pondering this and thinking about it. There are two things in the law itself. It says if there has not been a previous vote, does that allow for any kind of community referendum? Let's say this year for next year's vote, the law, it says if there has not been a place established by a previous vote of the district. That doesn't necessarily mean to me the board. Yeah, I do. And there's, what is the language that says if there hasn't been a previous vote referred to? It's still a decision for, so my other question to you is, let's say the board feels that the high school is not a safe place, or they feel that the community does not feel it's not a safe place, and therefore makes a decision to move the election to a different location. And so what are the consequences? I mean, do the Board of Ed police come and take me off to Bedford Women's? I mean, do we lose funding? What are the consequences if New York State disagrees with the board's decision?
Well, New York State won't disagree unless there's a commissioner's appeal brought. And then if there's a commissioner's appeal brought, the commissioner can pretty much do whatever he thinks is appropriate. Remember what the language of the statute. The language of the statute is it's supposed to be appropriate and accessible.
Right.
It doesn't define appropriate. There's very little case law on the area. It has always been deemed your determination as a board. If for some reason, let's say you wanted to hold it on the second floor and you don't have an elevator, clearly you can then decide.
That it's not accessible, because that's an ADA violation, right? So we have to make sure that everyone can have accessibility. So the reality is, as I read the law and as you're telling me, is that this is a very discretionary standard. So it's our decision.
Says otherwise. You may get people in the community who say, you know what, I've been voting at the high school for however long you've been conducting elections there. It's convenient for me. It appears appropriate. It is accessible. It's blocked off in terms of the entrance. You have a separate entrance. And somebody's going to say, you made a bad call by moving it. Where
Right.
you put it. And then you're going to end up with a commissioner's appeal, and I'll defend you, and we'll see what the commissioner says. I'm not prescient. I can't tell you where he would go with this, except that the preference in the statute.
It's for a schoolhouse. It's clear in the statute that it's for a schoolhouse. I'm just curious if we decided not to have it in a schoolhouse.
I'll be happy to defend you.
I know you will, because I pay the bills. But, my question is, it's within our discretion to move it. Right.
First instance, yes.
Okay. Okay. I just wanted that information.
Yeah, I'll address Grant's question, which is, do you see it? I'm speaking for myself personally. I'm not speaking on behalf of the board, and I personally do not believe that holding elections in schools it poses any greater risk to students than on any other school day. And for me personally, that goes for the high school, it goes for Seacliff School, and it goes for, I have not seen school elections in Glenwood Landing. I've not seen them take place in the middle school. So, you know, just my thinking of the way that the buildings are configured, clearly to me that it's very easy to secure the middle school in that gymnasium, that area of the school. I don't know Glenwood Landing as well, so for me personally, I don't want to fully comment on Glenwood Landing. But I can speak for this school, and I could also speak for Seacliff School. And I think it's, and I said this before, that if we're speaking about the high school, I do believe it's desirable. Not only adequate and accessible, but I do believe it's desirable to hold it in the high school. It is the most central location in the district. I think it is the most accessible location in the district. It's a place that people are familiar with. And so I do think it's desirable to have it here. I do not believe that it poses any additional risk whatsoever to students, especially on election day, with the security that we have here, the people in the yellow vests that are out in front of the school. To me, it seems perhaps among the most secure days of the year. The other thing is, I think just in terms of, you know, I'm coming from this, I guess, from the perspective of a social studies teacher as well. I think there is something desirable about holding elections in schools, that it shows students, people exercising their civic duty. You know, where I teach, we hold elections in that school. Whenever there's a school board vote, it turns into a discussion about what are they voting on? What do we mean by a school board? What is a budget? And you know, we have and this is not just this community, communities across Long Island, across New York State, where you have fewer than 20% of people voting in elections, in local elections. And oftentimes they're the elections that have the greatest impact on people's lives. And I want kids to see elections. Now, I don't want them to see elections if it poses any threat to them, and I don't believe it does. All right, so I think there are a lot of reasons why I think it's desirable.
I'm also a social studies teacher, and is this on? I can't even hear it. Okay, I'm Jennifer Lamont from Seacliff, and you know, I as a social studies teacher and a parent in the district and a longtime resident, I have to say that I think public schools are absolutely the bedrock of a community. It's a center of a community. They are the largest institutions in our community. They are the largest employers in a lot of cases of people in the community. And they are the centers of learning, not just for the people who go to school here, but for the residents of this community. They bring us together to attend school plays and athletic events, continuing education courses, art exhibitions, music concerts. Our public schools serve as community hubs that connect students, families, teachers, and businesses into a common interest. And it's so important that we keep people in the schools. To disconnect public schools from the community that they are in threatens to jeopardize the goodwill and support that the schools need from the community to pass school budgets and generate public discussion and debate openly. Having elections in public schools should be seen as an opportunity for our neighbors to step into the public school building. Sometimes it's the only time they're here if they don't have children, and see the schools that they're being asked to support financially. It has historically been the case here that it is an opportunity for community members to see the school facility, and in turn for the school to showcase student work to the community. And I'm speaking as a resident, and I'm speaking as a social studies teacher in a nearby school district that believes that the security risks are not as great as we're making it out to be, and that the benefit to the students and the community at large of teaching civics and having us all participate together in that system is much more important than, you know, this so-called threat that may or may not happen. Okay, the schools are being fortified enough. I think we need to keep the school in the community, as part of the community. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Ali Ciampa. I am a Glen Head resident. Thank you for giving this forum. Very quickly, I understand the civics lesson, everything. It's a different world. People didn't think a lot of things were possible. People went to work and terrible things have happened to them from September 11th. When now, just even what's going on with the voting, they're not interacting. People aren't coming in here and voting, and the kids aren't interacting with them and having ballot boxes. They're talking about already there's going to be no interaction with the public. People get their civics lessons from their families that talk about voting, and they go out and they demonstrate. It's not, there's no interaction between the kids and the community during school hours, and certainly not on election day, and certainly not now. So I think it's a little silly to act like this is what we're doing and it's going to happen that way on election day, because even this format, if it is kept here at the high school, there is clearly no interaction going on between the community and the students. On that note, a few school districts have moved it out successfully. Whether or not their attorney is going to fight for them if they get in trouble with people or not. We have New Hyde Park, Long Beach, Locust Valley, Lawrence. I don't have my glasses on. And I'm just curious if we would be open to exploring how they did it, speaking with them. They didn't, their budgets were passed. People voted. It's not that people didn't express their civic rights. Their towns didn't crumble. I think it's worth exploring. It's a different world. It just is, and I think it's silly to say things might not happen. I don't think we're being hyper-reactive. We're not sending our kids with Kevlar backpacks. It's just being proactive and being prudent. That's it. Thank you so much.
Oh, no, I'll wait my turn. I'll wait my turn. That's okay.
Okay. So I think that we represent the community, and I do understand the civics lesson, but I do also understand the concerns of the community. And while it is our decision, I think we have spent a lot of money on security, right? And I think it's very difficult to, if not impossible, to 100% secure your schools. But I think it's disingenuous for us to ask the community to continue to support us on spending on security, to not give them an opportunity to be heard on the elections. On a personal note, I think the high school is a very reasonable and secure place to have the board election, but I'm certainly open to having a discussion with the community. And I guess my question to you on the vote is there a way that we can get a sort of referendum from the community? Because I think, look, you know, we need the community support, and if they feel differently than we do, we need to understand what percentage of the community that is, and if there are reasonable alternatives that are not, that don't cost the district anything. Is there a way we can do that? I mean, I don't think it's feasible for this year, but that doesn't mean we can't continue the discussion for other years. I mean, I just think if you're going to ask the community to come out and support you on security. I'm asking you, is there a way to do? No. When I look at you, it's like, is there a way to get? Is there a way for us to get a referendum? I guess is what I started with a minute. It's all our decision. Right. Right, but it would give us a way to measure where the community sentiment is. No, and I don't have a horse in this race either, other than I'm willing to, you know, have a discussion about it. There will be people that'll show up. Yes. Not everybody's going to see them or read them or think they need to Right. So, yeah, I think, I do. I think this is not something that's really feasible for this year. This would have to be something that we would have to really think about and look at other locations and see how that would work out. But my question to you was more of, is there a way to do a referendum on it? I mean, that was my question.
Just to be clear, what you're saying is that a referendum is essentially a poll, correct?
It's nothing more than advisory.
Okay.
But understand that you have to make sure that the community understands that.
Well, I think that's important. If we have a poll and people feel like they're showing up to vote, that something is binding as opposed to just an opinion poll.
But the problem is that there's a political impact of holding something.
Sure, I agree.
On a decision, and then it turns out that even if it's a close majority, you decide not to change,
Right.
you're going to have some very disgruntled community members, maybe even more than you have now without.
I agree. I don't agree that we don't have collectively a horse in this race. I mean, I have children who walk in these buildings, and we all are responsible on this board for essentially two primary concerns, which is the education and the safety of these children who are in these schools. As a board member, I'm not a resident, I'm not a social studies teacher, I'm not a security expert, I'm a business person who comes to this, and my experience teaches me that I am not an expert on any of the specific issues that are out there, and so for me, Grant, I don't know where you are, Grant. Just come back to your question a little bit. I don't know what makes a facility safe or what makes one more safe than the other, and so for me, I look to experts to help inform that decision. So when we called in our security expert to look, we call in the community police officers, when we call in the Department of Homeland Security, when we call our legal team to give us advice on this, that holds a lot of weight for me. I also know that the community feeling is extremely important as well. People have to feel safe with their kids. We have seen issues where the community has expressed to us the way they feel about certain things, and there are times when there isn't an answer. We had an issue years ago with the mulch covering in our playground. I'm not sure who was familiar with that, but we spent a lot of time, I wasn't on the board then, we spent a lot of time as a community deciding, is this safe? Is this not safe? Is it toxic? Are our kids going to be hurt by this? What about the artificial turf that they're playing on at other community fields when they go and play for away sporting events? And at the end of that, unfortunately, there's no simple answer. It's not a math problem where you get to some concrete answer at the end. And so, Grant, as a board member, taking all that information into account and thinking about the pros and cons, hearing what people have to say, but also hearing the experts, to me, makes me feel somewhat comfortable with the idea that this is a safer location, which has been the advice that they've given us. The way that that building can be set apart from the rest of the school, the way that the parking and the way people come into this circle or oval is no different on election day than it is on any other day or any other night when we're having meetings in here. We're going to have a board meeting. We're having a town hall format right now, but every couple of weeks we're here with a board meeting, and this is an open campus to some degree, and we're taking steps. We're spending a lot of money, a lot of the community's money on safety. And when we make those decisions about what we're spending, again, knowing this is not a mathematical problem that tells you 2 + 2 = 4 at the end, it is a judgment call and to some degree an evaluation of the factors that you have to determine whether or not it makes sense. We could certainly go and spend $50 million and build an electronic fence and hire a small army to defend us. But at some point between here and there is a place that we as a community are not comfortable. And we as your representatives are charged with finding that comfort level. That's a balance, because there are 15,000 people in this community with probably, I would say 15,000 opinions, but it's probably more, that we have to try to balance. So for me, it's about what the experts have said largely. I'm sorry. Took too much time.
Okay. Okay. So my question or my concern comes in both as a parent of two Seacliff students and also as an educator. And my concern largely focuses on, while we're discussing the safety and what we've done to create these safe environments, we've also brought up the very important factor that the schools are central locations, and as a parent, I want to know what's going on inside my child's school on a minutely basis. But I do. I want to know, just like we all want to know. But I think that what my concern is that I don't want my child exposed to somebody who doesn't have their safety in mind or at the forefront of their mind, and who's more concerned about what is going on in the election and what they're fighting for. I think that there's a lot of political turmoil currently, and I don't have faith that every single body who walks into the school is concerned that my child is safe. So keeping that in mind, and keeping in mind that I want to know what goes on in my child's school, that doesn't mean that I want to be there next to them while I'm casting my vote or while others are casting their votes. So while we've spent a lot of time talking about, you know, creating these safe environments, and we've also had a lot of concerns about, you know, the schools being the center of the community, and obviously the civic responsibility is huge because I want my child to be feeling the need and the fire to express their opinion. I'm concerned that them being in the classroom, they're not seeing that. So my job as a parent, I can talk to them about it, but I also have to bring them with me. So if they're in school, I can't bring them with me to go and vote during the day. I think another concern of mine is that, again, in this day and age, it is a factor of life that we have lockdowns and lockouts. In that event, what's the protocol? Sorry, Danielle Feldman, Seacliff.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, so two things I wanted to respond to. So your question on reaching out to other districts, I've reached out to all the districts in Nassau County. There are two, with the exception of two school districts. Anybody who holds their election in a facility that is not a school is owned by the school district. So, for example, Herrick's owns their community center. They have their vote in the community center, right? So it's technically part of their schoolhouse, right? So we have the two that don't. I can't really speak for how and why they make that, they make that determination for themselves. But everybody else who has them not in a school has them in a facility that the district actually owns and operates. I didn't do that research, so I didn't. Right. Right. So that's the answer to can we reach out? I actually did do all that outreach. You're welcome. Your question about lockdown. So if there were a lockdown in the campus, we would be able. There will be no students in that section of the facility, so we wouldn't have to lock them down.
Okay.
But at the same time, we would also have the PA system is connected back there. So if we had a situation in the school proper or in the athletic complex, we would be able to enact our protocols within seconds.
So the doors would remain open and there would be like steel slats separating? So like we wouldn't be able to allow like a rogue person to have any sort of access to our students, our children.
So stick around for after. The way that we will set this up, if you're familiar with the complex back there, the single point of entry will be the main doors of the athletic complex, so off the parking lot.
Okay.
We'll have security positioned in the parking lot. We'll have security positioned at that door. We'll then have security. If you look straight back, you'll see another set of double doors.
Yes.
We'll have security positioned on the other side of those double doors as well. So, and then we'll have people monitoring through the space during the day. So there won't be steel slats or barriers but we will have a physical presence to secure the space itself.
And like at Parkland, where our physical presence is able to prevent all of, and in the
I
parking
can't really
lot,
speak
we don't
to-
allow the children to ever exit the door so that they could possibly come into contact?
I can't speak to Parkland, right? I think Parkland is a
Unfortunate situation.
is unfortunate, and you know, we would deal with it if something of that nature were to happen. That could happen on any day.
Right.
We would deal with it.
Okay. I think as a parent, I just want to make sure that knowing that that is in the world, we're doing everything absolutely humanly possible to minimize the access that, and I'm not saying that any resident of North Shore Schools would ever do anything like that.
I think about it every day.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Not to cut you off, Tony, but given the time constraints, we are going to move to the 2-minute limit. So,
I need less than 2 minutes. Okay. Hi, Tony Labate, Glen Head resident, former trustee. I don't think that the civics lesson is silly. I think that's unfair to say. Okay, so I heard you say that that the civics lesson is silly, and I think that's unfair to what we as a school district are trying to promote in our community. We are a public institution. We're a public building. We, as the board, when I sat on the board, and I know they continue to do, have spent a tremendous amount of money and time in securing these buildings and having Homeland Security, our local police officers, consultants come in. We've spent a tremendous amount of money to secure the buildings, to handle if there is an election and when there is election. So I don't support moving the election out of our schools. I think it's really important that our community comes into our building, sees our building, and I won't live in fear. I'm not going to think that Parkland is going to happen every time my kids come to school. And my kids come to school here too. And I don't want them to think that as well. And if I keep putting them in bubble wrap, and if I keep taking things out of their way, and moving, then they never learn how to cope. All I do is keep making them think that they should be fearful of things. So I don't support doing this. I do want to tell you, though, that the New York State School Board is having a lobby day on April 30th in Albany to support the legislation that Sarah brought up at the beginning. So I can understand why you would want to take a public election perhaps out of the elementary schools, but I cannot support taking it out of the high school and taking our school budget and trustee vote out. I think it's confusing to citizens, and we want our citizens to be part of it. Thank you.
Bruce Kennedy, Village of Seacliff. And Dave, while I certainly appreciate what you were saying before, this meeting right now and the Board of Ed meeting later on is missing the one ingredient that we're concerned about. That's the safety of children, not the adults that are showing up, but the children, which are here on Election Day. And being that I have a 2-minute limit, I'll just stick to my written comment, which is really short. If the goal of the election is a safe and accessible election, and you can increase the safety of the students, and you can adhere to the will of the residents by moving the elections off the school property, then why would the Board of Education oppose such an action? I know personally that, God forbid, the unspeakable ever happened on Election Day and one child was injured, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. Thank you.
I'll give a quick response, I think, because Bruce, thank you for the question. I can do it. Yeah. The Village of Seacliff did very graciously offer to let us use their Department of Public Works, which is where they hold their own elections. It's a sincere offer. So thus far, the concerns with this are the law indicating the issue of the schoolhouse. It's the right picture, right? You're looking at it strangely. Okay. No, right. So it's not a schoolhouse, that we have the issue with the computer networks.
There's a secure multi-access point Wi-Fi system in that building.
The main issue, the law, and we haven't been able to tour the facility. Looking at the parking and the size of the space. We have some other schematics, but I don't want, now I've just used up my own time. I don't want to use up the time of the other people that want to speak, but I did want to point out that you did offer this, and we've looked at these. There are no children there, but it's a.
Just a couple things. Our meetings
I've apparently set
almost
off a
always
firestorm.
have children at them. If you attend those who attend our school board meetings, they have student recognition. There are students all over this building at all hours of the day. We have enhanced security with security people here until 10 o'clock at night because the students are here. And also with the late evenings at our elementary schools. And Bruce, I think you raised a good point, but I think it's also the logic of if anything happens to anybody, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. I think that could apply to anything.
That's not what I did. I appreciate it. I didn't say that.
You said if something happens on the election day.
If something happened to a child on election day,
Yes.
fine within the building, yes. I don't know how we would do that.
But what if something happens to a child not on election day? What if something happens to a child in the children's library in Seacliff?
And I don't know if you're back and forth, but I can't get into this building. I can't get into this building when it's not election day.
That's not his point. His point is that we're giving another opportunity for something to happen that can be avoided. I think that's your point.
That is
I
right,
don't
but
want to
on a
paraphrase
normal
you.
day, if I came to this building, I can't get in. And if I went to Seacliff School, I can't get in. On an election day, the doors are open.
Everyone,
Okay,
I'm going to have to cut you off.
I think Tim could have a chance to respond.
I can give Tim a minute, but
Okay,
I'm going to
one
save the
minute,
last 2 minutes for the
to
people online.
To address Mr. Kennedy's comments, I don't believe there's any more risk to a child on election day. I don't believe there's any less risk to a child on election day. I think it's the same as any other day. You have people coming and going from the school, people who are able to come into the parking lot, who are able to leave the parking lot. People do not have access to this area of the building. I know I've seen things that have been written that says people can be walking around the building. That's inaccurate. Okay? It's completely inaccurate, and it is no greater risk. If there was a risk, listen, if there was a risk, I would support.
On election day, I walk through this building. It's not secure.
Yeah, it's not.
I'm sorry. It's not
During the school day you're talking about.
school day, election day. I've done it. Who else here has done it?
Oh. Okay. And if that is the case, certainly this year and in future years, that certainly will not be the case.
Right. That is absolutely the point of the slide we were talking about before, and the point of the tour we're going to give you later, which is the fact that this can be secured, and this is the part that Homeland Security has reviewed. President, may I
Hi.
have your name and telephone number?
Yeah. Hi. Sorry. My name is Tracy Backer, and I live in Seacliff. I have 3 kids. I wasn't planning on saying anything tonight, but that's why I'm wearing sweatpants and I'm all sweaty. But I just feel like I need to say something. I'm also the Nassau County lead of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. And so, I mean, I study gun violence for 40 hours a week for free, essentially. This is what I do. And guys, our kids are safe. I know that the media makes it seem like there are people with guns surrounding our children and they're constantly being threatened. And I mean, trust me, I have 3 kids. I know. I mean, I have friends who have lost their kids. I have friends who are now walking around with bullets inside of their body. living like that. Gun violence is a problem, but our schools are safe. The odds of there being a school shooting, the odds of somebody having a gun in your school, it's actually really slim. I know it doesn't seem like that, and we all want to keep our schools safe. But I just don't want people to be as frightened all the time. And like the former trustee said, you know, we can't wrap our kids in bubble wrap and we can't give in. That said, I mean, I see both sides of this, absolutely. I have been here for the budget vote with my kids, and we've wandered throughout the entire school. I mean, we peeked in on classrooms. I mean, and I think because I was a woman with 2 little kids, it seemed okay. But, I mean, there was no security. So, I mean, hopefully that is something that can be really locked down. But I also really just have a question, you know, in November on Election Day, there are no children in the schools. So I don't see a problem with elections on those days. What about, is there a push at all to, on the primary days, to keep kids out of school, to make it another conference day, or make it a holiday? Just keep the kids out of schools on those days. I don't know, you know, I see both sides. I'm really resistant as an activist as well to keep people from voting. You know, we have enough voter suppression in this country. We want to make it easy for people to vote while keeping our kids safe. But just, guys, I promise you, our kids are safe.
Thank you. Trustees, we're going to keep the time here because I think the tour is important too, and we've got the equipment moved, and the trustees, of course, will have time to discuss, make their comments during the motion later. Your name and town of residence, please.
Hello, everybody. I'm Wesley Leach. I live in Seacliff. During the elections, during the Seacliff elections, when the school was open, do they have people, the guards there, are they undercover? Are they not wearing any uniforms? Because when I was there last time, and I'm a police officer in the city of Glen Cove, I didn't see anybody, any security, and we look for it when we're there.
It's my understanding that the security is marked, but they are on, we can't put security in the polling place. We put the security in the school right outside the doors.
We walked everywhere.
Where people would
we didn't see anybody.
We'll discuss it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim Svensson, I live in Glenwood Landing. I have 2 kids there. Just quickly, there's a reason, I think, why most districts throughout Nassau County and probably the state have no kids in school on November 5th. It's because it's safer and it's easier. So I think that, you know, we could say, oh, it's okay on November 5th because there are no children there, so it's okay to have the election. Right. You know, and that's the same for a school board election. There's really no, for a budget vote and a school board election. I happen to work in New Hyde Park, so I was involved with the whole moving of the elections. It started just with general elections and primaries and such, that we wanted them to be moved out. It didn't feel it was safe. We're an elementary school district, New Hyde Park, Garden City Park, so it's just elementary schools. And while we're doing that, at the same time, we felt it's sort of hypocritical for us to ask them to move the general elections out, and then we're not willing to move our own school board elections and so on out. So we did the process of that. And it was some, you know, and we go to a private area. We go to Tully Park, the pool, if you know Tully Pool. So we go there. It's, you know, it wasn't ideal initially. It was a difficult time to get some people to understand that's where it is, but now everyone's used to it. And like any change, it takes a year, and then generally people get used to it. So I just feel like I agree, and I'm certainly not one to put my kids in bubble. As a matter of fact, I'm looking to kick them out sometimes. So I do agree that we can't overdo it, but I do think it's a different time. It's probably safer on election day than it is other days. I walked in here tonight, and there was no, you know, doors open, and nobody stopped me, and I could have walked all around the building tonight. And I go to the middle school for some committee meetings, and it's the same thing. The door's open, and nobody's there to stop me, and I walk around. So I would say it might be safer on the election day than it is tonight. And that worries me more, because if anyone could walk around, you know, and do things. So I think it's just, if we can be more cautious, why not be more cautious? It doesn't mean, I don't think anything's going to happen, and I do think the schools are safe. I work in them, so I hope they are. I believe in that. But if we can be more cautious, why not do it? Because it can't hurt. So.
Hi, my name's Katie. I'm not quite 23, so my official town of residence is Glen Head, New York, but I work at a high school in Houston, Texas. So here's your educator's perspective. My high school, my 14 to 18-year-olds go to work every single day in downtown Houston. I put them on a bus in the morning and I say, wear your little uniform. It says Cristo Rey Jesuit on every single article of clothing they wear so I don't lose them. And they got a big yellow and orange tie. I've never lost one. So they're wearing a uniform. We have one lady at the front desk who holds down the fort. I'm just not sure that this election is imposing any danger to your children. When I send my kids on a bus every single day downtown, nothing bad's ever happened to them. So here's the other half of that. My kids' parents get deported pretty regularly. No one else is teaching them how to vote. No one else is teaching them where to vote. That's my job. I registered my kids to vote. I did their FAFSAs. I did their college applications with them. And right now I'm putting together their college financial aid packages. Who is going to teach your underprivileged children to vote? Because they do exist in North Shore High School. If you are not taking the civic responsibility to show your students where to vote, and how to protect themselves against threats. The way to protect yourself against a threat is by voting for the politicians that you think that will represent you best and protect you the best. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful night. Yeah, that's my mom. I love her very much.
Thank you. We are 15 minutes over our time, and we have an issue with the equipment in the public session. We will take one final speaker. I don't wish to, suddenly cut you off.
Okay.
Name and town of residence, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, Chris Sanborn from Seacliff. And I will be very brief. A little bit of context. I am a member of a organization called Seacliff Votes, which we started a couple years ago, just very simply to get people to vote in our community, our very small town of 5,000 people. On March 19th, I will be using the website that I built for that organization to try to get people to vote in an uncontested election. I really like it when people vote. I want people to vote. I don't care who you vote for. I just want you to vote. I sort of share you guys' opinion about, if my daughter's in middle school and my kids will eventually be in high school, I don't personally think that I would feel like they were unsafe given all of the money that was spent on the consultants and things like that. And, hearing all of the evidence, I personally also it seems okay to me. However, if the majority of my neighbors had a position that they felt that their kids were not safe, my feeling is, just as a person and I think as a community, like our default posture should be for the safety of kids, even maybe over the civics things that come into it. I completely understand that argument and I think it's a valid one, but I think my hope would be that the debate that happens in the community is framed around that, right? Like, is it more important to eliminate what might be a pretty minute risk of safety versus the sort of civics aspect of it, and not like we're going to get sued by the state or something like that. I think my hope would be that that doesn't enter the conversation at all, because that seems silly. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We greatly appreciate you all coming. Please join us. We're going to take a tour, and we're going to have a conversation about what we can do both to make this area secure and safe from the students, and the efforts we can do to still preserve students' abilities to vote and people's ability to bring their families, should they choose to do so, and have that community aspect as well. We'll come with you. There is no executive session. We had originally scheduled an executive session for tonight. Apparently, I'm supposed to stop talking, but we will not be having one. And then the regular meeting is going to be at 7:45 in the library if you want to join us. Thank you.